Hello all, this is my review of Picard Season 3 Episode 6, The Bounty. As usual, I'll do a brief summary of my feelings and then go on to the spoilers at the end. It's a tricky one, this one. I did enjoy the episode, but compared to some of the others it felt a little emotionally flat. It felt much more like an episode that was pushing the story forward rather than as much character development, which is a bit strange because there are some returning faces. But I found a lot of this episode relies on nostalgia rather than actual emotion. Visuals, great again. Some nice interpersonal moments, but nothing that had any particular resonance for me. It was a little exposition heavy at times. At least one of the conversations felt like it was just an information dump, and much of that information we already knew. And there's a mystery in it, which I personally figured out pretty quickly. So after the heights of the previous episodes, this one was a bit workaday for me. I still enjoyed it, but it certainly didn't have the impact of the others. All the cast were great again. There was a little inconsistency in there. Another great moment from Shaw. He's just a constant revelation. I think that about sums it up. Sorry if I sounded a bit downbeat. It is a good episode. I'll get on to spoilers now. The episode starts with Baddock on the Shrike doing a ranty speech about how the Federation is going to burn, they're all going to die, and she definitely is a changeling. And we also get a sense that the creatures that she's with are also changelings, but they're not necessarily complete, if that makes sense. Almost like they're suits that have been filled with changeling goop rather than changelings. And she tells them that they need to find anybody and everybody Picard cared for. Picard's meeting with Beverly and finds out that Jack has Irumodic syndrome, which Picard passed on to him. And this is what's been causing his outbursts of anger and his visions. I don't believe that. I believe there's something far more going on with Jack. In the previous episode, when he had the red flashes and the door opened a little bit more before he switched into a kind of kill machine. Picard has this weird conversation with Jack when Jack's in a bar, and Jack's a bit of a dick to him. Understandably so, he's just found out he's got this degenerative disease. Worf and Raffi arrive on the Titan. Quite a comical scene there, and a slightly awkward scene between Raffi and Seven, because obviously they were in this weird non-relationship that was concocted in the last 5 seconds of the first series and never really did anything in the second series. And this is where the exposition dump happens and the repeating of stuff we already know. I appreciate that Worf and Raffi are having to fill in the others and the others are having to fill them in, but it's, as I keep saying, it's stuff I already know. I've seen this. I've just watched this in the last few episodes. You don't have to tell me the stuff I already know. It feels a little more conversational than the previous exposition dumps, but it is still just a lot of information I've heard. They come up with a plan to basically burgle the Daystrom Institute. Obviously, they once again mention the incredibly sophisticated AI. That's mentioned quite a few times, which makes it blindingly obvious what the incredibly complex AI is. So Riker, Worf and Raffi beam on board, manage to use the chip they were given in the last episode to disarm, or rather befuddle, the AI. And you just hear a voice whilst the AI is talking before it's befuddled. It's Data's voice, you can hear it for a split second. Sorry, that's a massive spoiler for the end, but you're in spoilers. Meanwhile, Starfleet suddenly arrive, and the Titan has to make a quick exit, telling the people on board Daystrom Station that they'll come back in an hour. Picard tells them where to go, and they arrive at the Museum of Starfleet, which has loads and loads of vessels, and the curator is Commander Geordie LaForge. He comes on board with daughter number 2, and he's pissed. He's not happy that they've put daughter number 1 in danger, and Picard tries to appeal to him for help, and you find out that they keep getting found by Starfleet because all of the Starfleet vessels are linked and communicate with each other, clearly foreshadowing something else that's coming up. He refuses to help, and he tries to get his daughter to leave with him. Their relationship is strained because she chose to be a pilot rather than an engineer, and this plays into the dynamic of the show. In fact, there are themes of family throughout this episode, and even a burgeoning romance between Jack and Sydney LaForge. She says, no, this is my family, I've made this decision to make this stand. Meanwhile, Jack is chatting to Seven, and there's a little bit of a weird character shift because he suddenly starts talking about family and everyone needs connections, and he was the one who said he didn't need connections. I'm not quite sure why he's giving advice to somebody else on that. Seven is basically flicking through all the ships that are stored at the museum, testing Jack on his knowledge. And we see the Defiant, the Enterprise, Kirk's Enterprise, and Voyager, and the Klingon bird of prey, which was from Star Trek 4. So again, as I say, very nostalgia heavy. There is a relevance to that. It turns out that they couldn't find it. It took them ages because the cloak was on and a light bulb goes off for Jack. Picard realises there's nothing he can do, tells Seven that they're going to have to go back to Daystrom and fight. At which point there's a surge of energy. Jack and Geordie's 2 daughters have stolen the cloaking device and are trying to install it, but they're doing it wrong. It could cause the ship to explode. Geordie makes a decision. He arrives in engineering and he helps them fix it and says he has to go with them because he'll fix it on the fly and that he's proud of his daughter. In the Daystrom Institute, Worf, Riker and Raffi encounter the AI. First off encounter a crow, then they keep hearing music, which Riker recognises, and then they're attacked by Moriarty. They manage to stop him, get to the database, and surprise, surprise, it's Data. Oh, there's a few little Easter eggs in there as well. There's the body of Kirk, there's a tribble, and there was something else I didn't recognise. I couldn't read what it said on the outside, but I'm sure people who are far, far more geeky than me will know exactly what it was. So apparently Data, or this new Data, is a far more advanced android that's a mixture of B4, Data and Lore. 3 different personalities within this android that are all separate. Right at that point, security turn up and the Titan shows up. I didn't really see the point of the cloak because they arrived, uncloaked, then they cloaked, then they had to uncloak for the teleport out. So it seemed a little stupid and pointless, but there you go. So they fly in. Security breaks into the room when they're trying to get Data free because Data's got the information about what was stolen from the Daystrom Institute. Riker goes to buy them time. He unfortunately is hit by a transporter inhibitor and Raffi, Data and Worf are all beamed out. They try and activate Data and we get a glimpse of B4 and Lore's personalities, although Data is slightly more prominent. We find out that the weapon that was stolen was Picard's body. That's his human body. So presumably someone's going to pretend to be him for the speech at Federation Day because once again they completely foreshadow that. This is one of my criticisms which I mentioned in the first review. The foreshadowing is really quite laboured. I mean, I'm going to look a complete idiot saying that if it turns out it's got nothing at all to do with Federation Day. Apparently Geordie also advised them not to gather all their ships in one place. And I must admit, it seems like a very, very strange thing to do. Although if the changeling infiltration of Starfleet goes that far, it could well be they're the ones who actually are organising it and making sure it happens. There's a scene between Worf and Picard where Worf says nothing will stop him from rescuing Riker. Meanwhile, Riker's being beaten for information. The Starfleet officer beating him kills the other 2 officers and transforms into Vadic. They're teleported onto the Shrike and it's revealed to Riker that she has Deanna. So yeah, as I say, there are some moments that are supposed to be kind of meaningful. Obviously, the arrival of Geordie is supposed to kick those nostalgia beads, but I was never really interested in Geordie. I found his stories always boring, and he was an okay side character, interesting enough, but there was never anything overly interesting to me about him. We now have the father and children dynamic echoed from Geordie and his daughters and Jack and Picard. There is actually a moment at the end of it where Jack goes to see Picard and there's a funny little conversation, and there are a few bits of humour through this episode. It's a little bit lighter at times. He tells Picard that apart from the Irumodic syndrome, he's inherited some good things too from him. So there's a few of those. They're nice character moments, but they didn't really get me in the feels. I still enjoyed it, and it's still better Star Trek. We still have the mystery of Jack, because I say I don't think that's been solved, because his Irumodic syndrome wouldn't be why they were trying to find him. Maybe it's for his DNA link to Picard. And it would be nice to see Worf go full Worf, because there's a few jokes in this about him being a pacifist more now. So I imagine at some point it's going to happen, which is always fun to see. Anyway, I'll leave that there. Curious to know what you thought about this episode, whether I missed anything, whether maybe I'm downplaying it, or if it felt like just a lot of key jangling member berries. If you've enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. And thank you very much for listening. Peace out.